what we showed you here is just one walkthrough. It's one version of the scene. But depending on how you play, you will see many different things. You can get arrested in this scene, for example, and unlock an entirely new part of the scene that you have not seen yet. So it's exactly the same. And this is true at the level of each scene. Each scene can be played in different ways and you can see different things. But at the scale of the full story, it's the same depending on the actions, the decisions that you make. Nothing QTE is what you do really. It's not about succeeding or failing, it's about what you do, what you decide, what you choose. You will have consequences in your life. So this is what is really, really important about this thing.
Well, I just saw you there get frustrated as you mentioned QTEs, but as you kept repeating that the guy was controlling the character, all we could see on screen were QTE points.
Yeah, I know. This is why I was mentioning.
So, can you describe just how misleading they are, just so to understand, and B, how that's changed since Heavy Rain, because they did seem to be the same sort of points.
They're the same interface at the moment that may still change until the end, but it's not the same gameplay. In Heavy Rain, when Jaden was chased in the market, for example, you were just playing the prompts. He was running on his own, he was choosing his path on his own, you were just choosing prompts. Here, when she's in the forest, you're in control of Julie. When she runs on the slope, when she runs in the forest, when she runs on the train, wherever she is, you're in control all the time, and the prompts are much more used like in a game like God of War, for example.
How large was that area? I mean,
large.
Could she have run to the left and
Of course. Again, we just chose one path. We showed you one way, but Guillaume was free to go wherever he wants all the time. So this is something I can spend 2 hours explaining. You won't get it until you play it, actually. But the big difference also with Heavy Rain is that we have much more exploration in Beyond that we had on Heavy Rain. Heavy Rain was mainly in small areas in apartments or in small houses. Where here you can
quite small for this game, and it would be great to see that they're much larger than this.
In Beyond, you will have a mix of different types of areas. You will have a lot of exploration. There are many things that you will see and discover, and I think people will be surprised by the size of some areas and how detailed they can be, although they are much, much bigger.
How did you, sort of kind of following on from that, I guess, how did you kind of approach this from a writing perspective? What kind of lessons did you take from Heavy Rain and indeed Fahrenheit in terms of sort of the way you make scenes work? And sort of how has that your kind of philosophy for this game kind of changed since Heavy Rain?
I wouldn't say that the philosophy has changed since Heavy Rain. It's a different story, in different style, in different genre, with a different balance of action and narrative and adventure in a way. And it's just a different flavor. And I think we improved in all areas. We will talk probably about the technology at some point, but we also improve the way it's filmed. The idea is not to create another video game that plays like a video game and looks like a video game where you got this character in cycles moving like this, but we want to create something fully organic in matter of animations, but also in matter of storytelling. So we try to create something completely different where it becomes an emotional journey where you live with this character. You start to like her, you spend time with her, you share how she feels, and your actions with her will have consequences. But you will also discover about identity, about this entity, but also about what's on the other side, because this game is really also about death. It's about what's on the other side, which will happen to us after we die. And this is, depending on how you play, something that Jolie may or may not discover.
Sorry,
oh my God.
sorry, that's that kind of thematic differences, which is really interesting. But what I kind of really meant was kind of from a kind of more technical kind of scripting point of view, that you had something in Heavy Rain where you come in and there's okay, fine, you can interact with these objects. This is where the scene goes. Has your attitude to kind of like that and how scenes play out changed?
We have. What I try to create is a story in which you feel you're free, and in which you feel that each time you do something, there is a logical consequence to your action. So this is how I feel. Now, what's a little bit new compared to Heavy Rain is there is much more a sandbox aspect to it, where it's less driven. It's a little bit more open. It's not the case all the time, but what I try to create is the illusion. Each time you will forget that this is a video game with a program running pixel in the background, then I'll be happy. I'll make you forget that this is a game. I want you just to forget about everything and just be with Judy Holmes. So again, it's very, what is tricky for me is to tell you about these themes and tell you about the emotions, tell you about what Ellen gave to us on stage in matter of acting, performance, based just on an action scene. But we need to start with something, and we thought of starting with an action scene, which is probably the most unexpected thing from Quantic Dream, which is now much more for experiences like Heavy Rain and Finite and for this kind of stuff. But we just wanted to see how what we learned about narrative, about cinematography, could be applied to an action sequence. Could we really create the sense that this is a manhunt, that you need to run for your life, that you have dogs in back of you and you have cops and you need to lead whatever happens, and also create the strange feeling of this tiny girl who seems so fragile and vulnerable, but actually she has a real power in her. I mean, these are some of the themes that we wanted to develop in these scenes. But again, this is the only scene. You will see the game is very diverse. Please.
Yeah, you talk about the young character. Then what about Aiden? One thing I noticed is that we don't know if we switch by ourselves or the game switch by itself.
There are both cases.
Yeah.
Both cases. Sometimes the story triggers the fact that you need to be Aiden, but sometimes you can switch. Most of the time you can switch by yourself. And what I want to say also is that Jody evolves through time, but Aiden also changes. His personality will change depending on what you did and how you wanted to establish this relationship.
The other question was the relation of between the two characters. Is there like talking to each other, or it's just something?
You know,
like
I've always been fascinated by people talking to no one, to an invisible friend. I think there's something really weird about this. And sometimes, if you're Parisian, you see people in the metro, homeless guys, and they're just talking to someone, can you hear me? Yeah, and being really upset, all this thing. And what would be really interesting is to think, you know what, maybe they're talking to someone, you just can't see him. And this is where the idea came from with Julie.
Can you explain how the actual mechanic of using Aiden's powers work when he was getting rid of the SWAT guys? And how is that power limited? And if you can just possess anyone, it would be quite easy. How do you make it actually look a proper gameplay mechanic?
I try to have as little mechanics as I can because I don't like mechanics. Mechanics are the opposite of life. Life is organic, it's chaotic. It's not like a set of 4 rules, and if I play on this button, this is what I'm going to get. So this is what I try to do in my work. But we have a couple of rules, and one rule is that depending on the aura, the color of the aura, you know what you can do with people. Orange auras allow you to possess them, and red auras allow you to shock them, so you can kill them. But all this is not like a set of rules and it's set in stone and these are mechanics. It depends on the age of Jody, what you can do with Aiden. His power grows. But it also depends on the mental state of Judy. If she's really tired, if she's really in bad shape, Aiden's power gets lower and lower. So it really depends. It goes with the health.
There's no actual physical skill to doing it. You just, if he's got an orange aura, you can possess him. That's that. You don't have to do anything.
Yes, you do it with the sticks. You play with sticks. There is a little tiny gameplay with the sticks.
The last question.
Last question. Okay. Oh my God, it was a very good question. Okay, please. Big responsibility.
Is Johnny trying not to make Aiden coming up? Like it seemed like Aiden is only coming when she's about to get caught, like with the dogs, and the player seemed to fail, and then Aiden came. If he didn't fail the action, would Aiden come up?
Something that is established very early on in the story is the fact that Aiden cannot interact with living beings. So she cannot just blast people. She can only blast objects. So that's the big difference. This is why Aiden cannot intervene anytime. So we really play with this rule, of course, and we've tried to create interesting situations where Jodie has to get rid of the dogs on her own, or sometimes where she can use different objects to get rid of people. So, guys, thank you very much.